the rise of the Eastern Roman Empire, and the reign of Justinian. The Byzantine Empire, known also as the Eastern Roman Empire, was one of history's longest-lasting civilizations. While the Western Roman Empire collapsed in 47 CE, the eastern half endured for another 1,000 years, preserving Roman traditions while evolving into a distinct empire centered around its capital, Constantinople. This empire saw moments of immense prosperity and periods of decline, but few times in its history were as transformative as the reign of Emperor Justinian, the 6th century. Justinian's rule marked one of the greatest efforts to restore Roman glory, launching ambitious military campaigns, enforcing legal reforms, and transforming the empire's architecture and culture. The foundation of the Eastern Roman Empire. The Eastern Roman Empire had its roots in 2085 CE. When Emperor Diocletian divided the empire for more effective governance. The western half, ruled from Milan and later Ravenna, was weaker and constantly under attack. Meanwhile, the eastern half, governed from Byzantium, enjoyed a stronger economy and strategic positioning. In 3030 CE, Emperor Constantine the Great moved the Roman capital from Rome to Byzantium, renaming it Constantinople. It became a center of trade, politics, and religion, securing its dominance, even after the fall of the West. By the time Justinian ascended the throne in 5027 CE, the empire had already outlived the West for over 50 years. But Justinian had greater ambitions. He sought to reunify the Roman world, and leave behind an empire even greater than before. Justinian's conquests and military campaigns. Justinian's vision of a restored Roman Empire depended on his general Belisarius, one of the greatest military leaders in history. The war against the Vandals. Justinian's first major conquest was North Africa, then controlled by the Vandal kingdom. The Vandals had established themselves there after the sack of Rome. Belisarius launched an invasion with a fleet of 500 ships and 15,000 soldiers. The Vandals, unprepared for such an attack, were quickly defeated. By 5034 CE, the Vandal kingdom ceased to exist, and North Africa was restored to Byzantine control. The Gothic War 5035-54 CE. Justinian then turned his attention to Italy, controlled by the Ostrogoths. In 5035 CE, Belisarius landed in Sicily and quickly advanced northward. He captured Rome in 5036 CE, but the Ostrogoths, under their new king Totila, retaliated. The war lasted nearly 20 years, devastating Italy. Justinian sent another general, Narses, who finally crushed the Ostrogoths. In 5050 TE, Italy was now part of the Byzantine Empire once more, though it was left in ruins after years of war. The conquest of Spain. After Italy, Justinian's forces moved into Spain, ruled by the Visigoths. In 5050 TE, Byzantine troops captured parts of southern Spain. Although the conquest was limited, it still expanded Byzantine control across the Mediterranean. By 5054 CE, Justinian had succeeded in rebuilding the Roman Empire, stretching from North Africa to Italy and parts of Spain. However, these gains came at a high cost. The empire was overextended, its economy strained, and its military stretched thin. Justinian's legal reforms. The Corpus Juris Civilis. One of Justinian's most lasting legacies was his reform of Roman law. Before his reign, Roman laws were scattered, inconsistent, and outdated. Justinian commissioned his jurist, Tribonian, to compile and organize centuries of laws. The result was the Corpus Juris Civilis, or body of civil law, published in 5020. It consisted of four main parts: the Codex Justinianus, which compiled existing laws; the Digest, which summarized legal opinions; the Institutes, a legal textbook; the Novellae, new laws added later. This legal system became the foundation of modern civil law, influencing European legal traditions for centuries. The Nika Riots, a near collapse of Justinian's rule. In 5032 CE, Justinian faced a massive uprising known as the Nika Riots. The riots began in the Hippodrome, where chariot racing factions, the Blues and the Greens, turned against the emperor. Fueled by high taxes and corruption, the mob set Constantinople ablaze. The rebels even declared a new emperor, Hypatian. Justinian considered fleeing, but his wife, Empress Theodora, refused. saying purple is a noble color for a shroud, meaning she would rather die as an empress than flee in disgrace. Justinian, inspired by her words, ordered Belisarius to take action. Belisarius tricked the rebels into gathering inside the hippodrome, then slaughtered over 30,000 people in a single day. The revolt ended, and Justinian retained his throne. The Hagia Sophia, Justinian's architectural triumph. Following the destruction of Constantinople during the Nika Riots, Justinian ordered the reconstruction of the city. His most significant achievement was the construction of the Hagia Sophia. Built between 5032 and 5037 CE, it became the greatest church in Christendom. Its massive dome, elaborate mosaics, and golden decorations showcased Byzantine grandeur. For nearly 1,000 years, the Hagia Sophia remained the largest cathedral in the world. The Plague of Justinian 5041-5042 CE. Despite his successes, Justinian's reign suffered a catastrophic disaster, a bubonic plague outbreak. The Plague of Justinian is believed to have originated in Egypt. By 5042 CE, it reached Constantinople, killing nearly 40%. The disease was caused by the same bacterium responsible for the Black Death in the 14th century. The devastation crippled the empire, weakening its military and economy. The death of Justinian and the aftermath. Justinian died in 5065 CE. After nearly 40 years of rule, his successors struggled to maintain the empire's vast territories. By the late 6th century, the Byzantines lost much of Italy and Spain. Worse still, new enemies emerged: the Sassanid Persians in the east and the Avars and Slavs in the Balkans. The Byzantine Empire's struggles and the rise of Heraclius. As the 6th century came to an end, the Byzantine Empire faced increasing turmoil. Although Justinian had left behind a legacy of military conquest, legal reforms, and grand architecture, his empire was overstretched and vulnerable. By the late 6th and early 7th centuries, Byzantium faced relentless pressure from all sides: barbarians in the Balkans, Persians in the east, and new invaders emerging from Arabia. This period saw the rise of Emperor Heraclius, whose reign would redefine the empire's survival and identity. The empire's weakening and internal instability. After Justinian's death in 5065 CE, his successors struggled to hold on to the empire's vast territories. His immediate successor, Justin II, lacked the military and diplomatic skills necessary to maintain control. The Lombards invaded Italy in 5068 CE, reducing Byzantine rule in the region. In the Balkans, the Avars and Slavs launched constant raids, forcing Byzantium to fight on multiple fronts. But the greatest threat came from the Sassanid Persian Empire, Byzantium's old enemy in the east. By the late 6th century, the empire was bankrupt, politically unstable, and losing territory at an alarming rate. The Byzantine-Sassanid Wars. Focus: a brutal and unpopular usurper seized power after executing Emperor Maurice and his sons. Seeing an opportunity, Khosrow II, the ruler of Persia, invaded Byzantine territory, claiming he was avenging Maurice. The Persians swept through Syria, Palestine, and Egypt, capturing Jerusalem in 614 CE and stealing the True Cross, a sacred Christian relic. The Byzantine Empire had lost Egypt, its most valuable province, cutting off the empire's grain supply. Constantinople itself was under threat, and many believed the empire was doomed. With Byzantium on the verge of collapse, a new leader emerged: Heraclius. The rise of Emperor Heraclius. In 610 CE, Heraclius, a general from North Africa, sailed to Constantinople and overthrew Phocis. He inherited a nearly ruined empire, with the Persians controlling vast territories in the east. His first challenge was reforming the army and restoring stability to the empire. He introduced a new administrative system, reorganizing the empire into themes or military provinces. The empire was still on the defensive, but Heraclius was determined to strike back. Heraclius' counter-offensive against Persia. Leading his forces personally, he marched deep into Persian territory, striking the enemy where they least expected. In 624 CE, he sacked Zoroastrian temples in Persia, demoralizing his enemies. In 627 CE, he won a decisive victory at the Battle of Nineveh, shattering Persian power. In 628 CE, Persia was in chaos, and Khosrow II was overthrown by his own people. The Byzantines reclaimed Jerusalem and the True Cross. Heraclius' campaign was one of the greatest military turnarounds in history, from the brink of collapse to total victory. But the celebration would not last long. A new and even greater threat was rising in the Arabian Peninsula: the rise of Islam and the Arab conquests. During the same period, a religious and military revolution was unfolding in Arabia. In 6022 CE, the Prophet Muhammad led his followers to Medina, marking the start of the Islamic calendar. By 6032 CE, Islam had spread across Arabia, and the region was now unified under the Rashidun Caliphate. The Arabs, energized by religious zeal and military skill, launched an invasion of Byzantine and Persian lands. In 6036 CE, the Byzantines suffered a devastating defeat at the Battle of Yarmouk. Within a decade, the Arabs conquered Syria, Palestine and Egypt, permanently removing them from Byzantine control. These losses were far more catastrophic than any previous defeat. Unlike the wars with Persia, the Byzantines would never reclaim these lands. The defense of Constantinople. Despite losing its eastern provinces, the Byzantine Empire still had one major advantage: Constantinople. In 674 CE, the Umayyad Caliphate launched the first Muslim siege of Constantinople. The city, protected by its legendary walls, held firm. The Byzantines used Greek fire, a terrifying incendiary weapon, to burn enemy ships. After years of assaults, the Arabs failed to capture the city and withdrew in 6078 CE. This victory saved Byzantium and prevented the immediate fall of the empire. The transition from Roman to Byzantine identity. By the 7th century, the Byzantine Empire had transformed. Greek, rather than Latin, became the official language of the empire. The emperor now ruled as Basileus, the Greek title for king, instead of the Latin imperator. Christianity was now the defining identity of the empire, and the emperor was considered God's representative on earth. Though it still called itself Roman, Byzantium was now very different from the empire of Constantine or Justinian. The Byzantine Empire's resurgence and the Macedonian Renaissance. By the end of the 7th century, the Byzantine Empire had shrunk dramatically. The loss of Egypt, Syria, and Palestine to the Muslim caliphates had permanently weakened its power. The empire had transformed from a Mediterranean superpower into a regional Greek-speaking state, with its core territories in Anatolia and the Balkans. Despite this, Byzantium would survive and rebuild, entering a new era of military strength, cultural achievements, and territorial expansion under the Macedonian dynasty, the Isaurian dynasty and the First Iconoclasm, 717–8043 CE. Following the defense of Constantinople, Byzantium found itself in a prolonged conflict with both the Umayyads, and later the Abbasids. Emperor Leo III led a series of military and administrative reforms that helped stabilize the empire. One of his most controversial policies was iconoclasm, the rejection of religious icons and images, which divided Byzantine society. Leo III and his successor Constantine V waged war against the Bulgars in the north, while defending against Arab incursions in the east. The empire managed to hold its borders, but internal religious conflict over iconoclasm weakened. In 8043 CE, Empress Theodora, acting as regent for her young son Michael III, ended the iconoclasm controversy. With religious unity restored, the Byzantines could refocus on military expansion and cultural growth. The rise of the Macedonian dynasty. In 8067 CE, a new emperor seized the throne, Basil I, founder of the Macedonian dynasty. Under this dynasty, the Byzantine Empire would experience a period of revitalization, territorial expansion, and intellectual growth, often called the Macedonian Renaissance. Basil I and the strengthening of Byzantium. Basil I came from humble origins. He was a peasant from Macedonia, who rose to power through his skills as a wrestler and horse trainer. Once he became emperor, he reformed the military, economy and law, laying the groundwork for the empire's resurgence. He revitalized Justinian's legal system, creating the Basilica, a collection of laws written in Greek, making them more accessible. He also strengthened the Byzantine navy, ensuring control over the Aegean Sea. Under Basil I, Byzantium was once again a formidable power, but it was his successors who would bring the empire to new heights. The Macedonian Renaissance, cultural and military revival. The 9th and 10th centuries were a golden age for Byzantine art, literature and scholarship. Byzantine art flourished, with grand mosaics, illuminated manuscripts, and architectural masterpieces. The University of Constantinople was revived, becoming a major center for learning. Byzantine scholars preserved and copied ancient Greek texts, keeping the classical knowledge alive for future generations. At the same time, the empire expanded militarily, regaining lost territory. The 10th century Byzantine expansion. The most successful emperor of the Macedonian dynasty was Basil II, known as Basil the Bulgar Slayer. The wars against Bulgaria, the Bulgarians, under their Tsar Samuel, had been a persistent threat. Basil II launched a relentless campaign against them, culminating in the Battle of Clydion, 1014 CE. According to legend, Basil blinded 99 out of every 100 Bulgarian prisoners, leaving one-eyed soldiers to lead the others back home. When Tsar Samuel saw his defeated army, he suffered a heart attack and died. By 1018 CE, Bulgaria was completely annexed into the Byzantine Empire. This victory secured Byzantine dominance in the Balkans. The wars in the east, Byzantine success against the Muslims. Basil II also launched campaigns in the east, reclaiming lost cities in Armenia and Syria. He fought against the Fatimid Caliphate and fortified Byzantine frontiers, preventing further invasion. By the time of his death, the Byzantine Empire had reached its greatest territorial extent since Justinian. Basil II left behind a strong and wealthy empire, but his successors were weak and incompetent. This led to internal strife, weakening the state at a time when new threats were emerging. The 11th century decline in the Battle of Manzikert, 1071 CE. After Basil II's death, the empire fell into decline due to political corruption, incompetent rulers, and court intrigue. Military decline. The professional army was neglected in favor of unreliable mercenaries. Economic struggles. Heavy taxation led to unrest among the population. The Seljuk Turkish invasions. A new and powerful enemy emerged in the east. The Seljuk in 1071 CE, the Byzantines suffered a catastrophic defeat at the Battle of Manzikert. Emperor Romanos IV was captured by the Seljuks, and Anatolia, the heartland of Byzantium, was overrun. This defeat permanently weakened the Byzantine Empire, setting the stage for centuries of decline. The First Crusade and the Byzantine Western Divide. In response to the loss of Anatolia, Emperor Alexios I, Komnenos, made a desperate appeal to Pope Urban II for help. The Pope responded by launching the First Crusade, 10. The Crusaders recaptured much of Syria and Palestine, but instead of handing these lands back to Byzantium, they created their own Crusader states. Relations between Byzantium and the West deteriorated, leading to tensions that would culminate in the sack of Constantinople and the decline of the Byzantine Empire. When the Fourth Crusade, by the late 11th century, the Byzantine Empire was in serious decline. The once mighty empire that had dominated the eastern Mediterranean for centuries was now besieged by internal strife and external enemies. The Battle of Manzikert, 1071, marked the beginning of a slow collapse, as the empire struggled to maintain its territories against the Seljuk Turks, Crusaders, and the rising power of Western Europe. The Fourth Crusade, 1204, originally intended to reclaim the Holy Land, would instead devastate Constantinople, sealing the fate of Byzantium. The aftermath of Manzikert, and the loss of Anatolia. Following the disastrous defeat at Manzikert, the Byzantine heartland of Anatolia fell to the Seljuk Turks, who established the Sultanate of Rum. The Byzantine army was weakened, and Turkish warlords began settling in Byzantine lands. The empire descended into civil war, as rival factions fought for the throne. The nobility competed for power, while the empire's economy weakened due to the loss of rich farmland. Amidst this chaos, a new emperor emerged, Alexios I, Komnenos, Ors 1081 to 1118 CE. The Komnenian Restoration and the First Crusade. Alexios I Komnenos reorganized the empire, leading a temporary recovery. He reformed the military, shifting from unreliable mercenaries to a system of land-based military service. He fortified Constantinople, reinforcing its defenses against future attacks. Recognizing that Byzantium could not fight the Turks alone, he turned to the west for help. The First Crusade, 1096-1099 CE. In 1095 CE, Alexios requested military aid from Pope Urban II, hoping for a small force of knights. Instead, the Pope called for a holy war, launching the First Crusade. The Crusaders marched through Byzantine lands, retaking cities not for Byzantium,
but for themselves. While Alexios managed to recover parts of Anatolia, the Crusaders established independent Crusader states, weakening Byzantine control over the region. Despite tensions with the Crusaders, Alexios I stabilized the empire, beginning a brief period of revival under the Komnenian dynasty, the 12th century resurgence, Byzantium's last strong emperors, 1180 CE. Following Alexios I, two strong emperors, John II Komnenos (1118–1143 CE) and Manuel I Komnenos, brought a final golden age to Byzantium. The Byzantines pushed back the Turks, regaining control over parts of Anatolia. Trade flourished, especially with Venice, Genoa, and Pisa, making Constantinople the wealthiest city in Europe. Byzantine armies defended the empire against Crusader incursions. However, this prosperity did not last. After Manuel I's death in 1180, the empire entered another period of decline. The Anjouan dynasty and the road to the Fourth Crusade, 1185–104 CE. The Komnenian dynasty collapsed in 1185, replaced by the Anjouan family, one of the weakest ruling dynasties in Byzantine history. The new rulers were incompetent, corrupt, and focused more on personal wealth than governing the empire. The empire became divided by rival factions, making it vulnerable to invasion. Relations with Venice, once a key trading partner, soured, leading to conflicts with Italian merchants. By the late 12th century, Byzantium was on the verge of economic and political collapse. And then came the Fourth Crusade. The Fourth Crusade and the sack of Constantinople, 1204 CE. The Fourth Crusade was originally intended to reclaim Jerusalem from the Muslims. However, due to Venetian influence and political rivalries, it never reached the Holy Land. How the Crusade was diverted to Constantinople. In 1202 CE, the Crusaders gathered in Venice, expecting transport to the Levant. However, the Crusaders could not afford to pay for the ship. Venice's ruler Doge Enrico Dandolo offered a deal. The Crusaders would attack Zara, a city controlled by Hungary, a Catholic kingdom. The Crusaders agreed, but their attack on fellow Christians angered the Pope. The Byzantine prince's request. In 1203, Byzantine Prince Alexios IV, Anjou sought the help of the Crusaders to depose his uncle, the Emperor Alexios III. In exchange, he promised them money and support for the crusade. The Crusaders marched on Constantinople, forcing Alexios III to flee. Alexios IV became emperor, but failed to fulfill his promises, leading to riots and unrest. The sack of Constantinople, April 1204. In 1204 CE, frustrated by the lack of payment, the Crusaders stormed the city. The greatest Christian city in the world was pillaged by fellow Christians. Churches, palaces and libraries were looted. Priceless relics, icons and artworks were destroyed or stolen, many ending up in Western Europe. Thousands were killed, and Byzantine nobility was scattered. The Byzantines had lost their capital, and the empire was shattered. The Latin Empire. Following the sack of Constantinople, the Crusaders established the Latin Empire, with Baldwin of Flanders as emperor. Byzantine aristocrats fled to form rival Byzantine states in Nicaea, Trebizond, and Epirus. The Venetians took control of key trade routes and islands, dominating Byzantine commerce. The Latin Empire struggled to govern, constantly battling Byzantine resistance and Bulgarian incursions. The Byzantine counterattack. The most successful Byzantine successor state was the Empire of Nicaea. Emperor Michael IX Palaiologos launched a counterattack, retaking Constantinople. The Byzantine Empire was restored, but it would never recover its former strength.
The last days of Byzantium and the rise of the Ottomans. The restoration of Constantinople in 1261 brought hope to the Byzantine Empire. But it was a shadow of its former self. The once mighty empire was economically ruined, militarily weak, and politically unstable. For the next 2 centuries, Byzantium fought desperately to defend its last remaining territories. However, a new and powerful force was rising in Anatolia, the Ottoman Empire. By 1453, Constantinople would fall, and with it, the final chapter of the Roman Empire would come to an end. The Palaiologos Restoration, 1261–1328 CE. A temporary revival after reclaiming Constantinople from the Latins in 1261 CE. Emperor Michael VIII, Palaiologos sought to rebuild the empire. Byzantine rule was restored, but much of the empire's former wealth had been stolen by the Crusaders. Venice and Genoa controlled key trade routes, forcing Byzantium into economic dependence on Italian merchants. The Byzantines struggled to regain lost territories in Greece and Anatolia, but their army was weakened. The Ottoman Turks were beginning their expansion in Asia Minor, taking land that Byzantium could not defend. Michael VIII attempted to repair relations with Western Europe, but the Byzantine people resisted any union with the Catholic Church. As a result, the West offered little military support. After Michael's death in 1282, the empire continued to decline under his successors, including Andronikos II and Andronikos III, who fought constant civil wars and struggled to hold the empire together. The rise of the Ottoman Empire. While Byzantium was weakened by civil wars, a new power was rising in Anatolia. In 1299, Osman I founded what would become the Ottoman Empire. His successors, Orhan and Murad I, expanded into Byzantine territory and captured key cities in Asia Minor and the Balkans. The Ottoman expansion, 1326, the Ottomans captured Bursa, making it their first capital. 1354, the Ottomans took Gallipoli, gaining a foothold in Europe. 1361, Adrianople, Edirne, was captured and became the new Ottoman capital. 1389, at the Battle of Kosovo, the Ottomans defeated the Serbs, further expanding into the Balkans. 1396, the Christian powers launched a crusade against the Ottomans, but were crushed at the Battle of Nicopolis. By the late 14th century, the Ottomans surrounded what was left of the Byzantine Empire. Constantinople was isolated, and its remaining territories were fragmented and weak. The brief respite, the invasion of Tamerlane, 1402 CE. By 1400, the Ottomans were preparing to besiege Constantinople. However, in 1402, an unexpected event delayed the inevitable. Tamerlane, the powerful Turco-Mongol warlord, invaded Anatolia and crushed the Ottoman army at the Battle of Ankara. Sultan Bayezid I was captured and later died in captivity, throwing the Ottoman Empire into chaos. A period of civil war followed among Bayezid's sons, allowing the Byzantines to breathe a little longer. During this brief window of peace, Emperor Manuel II Palaiologos traveled across Western Europe, desperately seeking help against the Ottoman. Despite promises from the Pope and various kings, no substantial aid arrived. By 1413, the Ottomans had stabilized under Mehmed I, and their advance resumed. The last Byzantine emperors and the final struggles. Byzantium in the 15th century was reduced to little more than Constantinople and a few scattered territories in Greece. Emperor John VIII, Palaiologos, 1425-1448, attempted to secure aid from the West by agreeing to unite the Orthodox and Catholic churches. However, the Byzantine population rejected this union, viewing it as a betrayal. The Last Crusade, 1444 CE. In 1444, the Christian kingdoms of Hungary, Poland and Wallachia launched a final attempt to defeat the Ottomans. At the Battle of Varna, the Christian forces were crushed by Sultan Murad II, ending any hope of European intervention. The rise of Mehmed II, 1451 CE. In 1451, the Ottoman throne passed to Mehmed II, a young and ambitious ruler determined to conquer Constantinople. Mehmed built a massive fortress, Rumeli Hisar, on the European side of the Bosporus Strait, cutting off the city from any possible aid. He assembled an army of over 80,000 men, including elite janissaries, and constructed massive cannons capable of breaching the city's legendary walls. The final battle for Constantinople was about to begin. The fall of Constantinople, April 6, May 29, 1453 CE. On April 6, 1453, the Ottoman siege of Constantinople began. Emperor Constantine XI Palaiologos, the last Byzantine emperor, led a desperate defense. Key events of the siege. April 6, Mehmed II bombarded the walls, using massive cannons, including the famous Basilica Cannon, capable of firing 1,200-pound cannonball. April 22, the Ottomans carried their ships over land to bypass the Great Chain blocking the Golden Horn, cutting off the city's defenses. May 29, Mehmed launched his final assault, overwhelming the exhausted defender. As Ottoman soldiers poured through the breaches, Emperor Constantine XI charged into battle and was killed, refusing to flee. By midday the city had fallen, the aftermath, the end of Byzantium and the birth of an empire. With the fall of Constantinople, the Byzantine Empire was no more. Mehmed II declared himself Caesar of Rome, styling the Ottomans as the successors to the Roman and Byzantine empires. Constantinople became the new Ottoman capital, marking the beginning of the Ottoman Golden Age. The Hagia Sophia, the greatest church of the Orthodox world, was converted into a mosque. Many Greek scholars and artists fled to Italy, sparking the Renaissance in Europe. Orthodox Christianity survived, but its influence waned, as the Ottomans now ruled over most of the former Byzantine world. Despite its fall, the legacy of Byzantium lived on through its art, law, and culture, influencing both the Ottoman Empire and Renaissance Europe. The Byzantine Empire, which had stood for over 1,100 years, was now gone. The Ottomans became the dominant power in the Mediterranean and the Islamic world. The Renaissance, fueled by Greek scholars who fled Byzantium, transformed European culture. The Orthodox Church survived under Ottoman rule, but would never again hold the power it once had. Though Byzantium had fallen, its legacy endured, shaping the course of world history for centuries to come.